kicking off a week of our top reporters, adding some perspective. So, Holly, thanks for being here. The top 25 is out. We'll have that in its entirety. But first, let's just start at the top with our top 5 and a couple of interesting nuggets about all the teams there. Texas is the preseason #1 for the first time in program history with their lineage. That sounds a little strange, but it's true. Keep in mind they were the #1 team in the coaches poll last week. Penn State's #1 across the board in these preseason Big Ten polls, but they'll have to settle for #2 in the preseason poll, their highest ranking since Joe Paterno in 1997. The defending champions, with arguably the most talented offensive and defensive player in the entire sport, finish at 3, but we know how hard it is to repeat in this sport. Clemson is sitting there at 4th, a little bit after many people thought Dabo Swinney and company were done at the elite level of college football, something we'll dig into on College Football Live in just a bit. Georgia is at 5. It's their lowest preseason ranking since 2021. That could be a good omen because in 2021, they started what would be a run of back-to-back national championships in 21, in 22. Take a look at the top 10. Alabama, in a critical year for Kalen DeBoer, will begin at #8. Miami with Carson Beck rounds out the top 10. As we take a look at 11 through 20, look at the bookends. Arizona State made the playoff. Nobody saw it coming. Indiana made the playoff. Nobody saw it coming. They have both been rewarded by ending up in the top 20. Ole Miss will replace Jackson Dart. Iowa State's going to start the season in Ireland against Kansas State. And Boise State, fresh off one of their greatest seasons ever and a Heisman Trophy runner-up, sits there at #25. One thing I should note as we begin our discussion, the last team to start #1 in the preseason poll and finish #1, Alabama in 2017. So it's been a while. So initial impressions. Harry, let's begin with you.
Yeah, Zubin, when I look at the top 4, at least, you could have convinced me basically any of these teams to be #1 in the country. Obviously, Texas got that nod this year. I personally would have put Penn State there, given everything that they've got coming back, both offensively and defensively. Ohio State, I'm not as confident in this group just because of the uncertainty at the quarterback position, but I think when you look at them having the best player on offense in the country in Jeremiah Smith and arguably on defense as well in Caleb Downs, you can obviously always expect the Buckeyes to reload and not have to rebuild. And then, of course, Clemson, when you look at this team and what they've got returning with Cade Klubnik, that offensive line, the weapons that they are going to have, to me, this Clemson team is going to look a lot like it did when it was at its peak as opposed to what we've seen the last few years because of the culture and Dabo Swinney hitting the transfer portal as well, hitting some of their weak spots. But again, I think when you look at this group minus Ohio State, you could convince me strongly of any of them having the #1 spot.
Yeah, I was shocked at how high Ohio State was ranked. I understand that there's confidence in Julian Sayin coming in at quarterback, and Caleb Downs, the best defender, one of the best defenders in college football, Jeremiah Smith. But this team lost 15 starters from last year's team. 8 on defense, 7 on offense. So all those players who you saw make all those plays for the most part outside of those 2 we named, they're either in the NFL or making plays now for NFL teams. So there's so much talent to replace. And it's not as if Ohio State doesn't recruit well and they're not talented, but you have to actually step up and be the player to make the play. It can't just be one guy. It can't just be Caleb Downs. It can't just be Jeremiah Smith. You're replacing 8 on defense. And oh, by the way, a defensive coordinator is going to be new as well. I think there's just too much to replace for them to be a top 4 team.
Well, I think if that one guy is Jeremiah Smith, that helps you a lot because he's built like nobody else in America. And he's going to consistently be a coverage problem, but who's going to be their quarterback? That's a real question mark for Ohio State just a few weeks before the season. For me, as I look at this poll, I think Texas and Penn State are a fascinating conversation. This is the closest vote for 1 and 2 since 1998 in the AP poll. This poll's been around since 1936, so that should give you a clue of just how close people think these 2 teams are. And as you look at their start to the season, Ohio State, Texas having to go in there to the horseshoe and play, that is a really tough way to put yourself on the block in the beginning of the season. So Penn State, who starts with San Jose State, Nevada, Florida International, and Villanova, their schedule lends to a little bit better start to the season, but I do like Texas challenging themselves.
Interesting. And you mentioned how interesting of a story Texas is, so that's where we'll go next. Sam, we'll start with you. I'm still bowled over by the fact that of everything they've done on the 40 acres, this is their first ever preseason #1 ranking. How do you see your Horns?
I like the ranking, but obviously you have to go and play the games. Texas defensively is, I think, what we need to talk about more. We talk about the offense, sure. Talk about Arch Manning all you want, the running game. But their defense is returning for a fourth straight year. Their coordinator, Pete Kwiatkowski. Then you got some dogs on the defensive side of the ball. Michael Taft, who's a former walk-on, who stepped on now as a preseason All-American. Guys like Anthony Hill, who some might argue is the best player in college football. He's a linebacker. There's so much talent on that Texas team overall, not just at quarterback, running back, and receiver, but also the defense. They were a top defense last year. I think that will help carry them towards that high ranking again this season.
Holly, to you on Texas here, and the key is there is so much talk about Arch Manning, and we're all guilty as charged here talking about Arch, but do you think there is so much more, particularly on offense, that's the real story here that's really not getting talked about?
I think we all have Arch Madness, right? I think somebody should hashtag that. And rightfully so. People have been waiting a long time to see this young man play. But how will he be successful? It's the players around him. And I think one thing that no one is talking about is how much they lost on the offensive line in front of him. Jake Majors was a center that started almost every single game for 4 years at Texas, and he's gone. The football coaches described him to me as a cyborg for football. He was so smart. So they're going to have a brand new center this season, a young man who started at right guard, 13 games over the course of his 3-year career. And so Cole Hudson's got a big assignment. You're going to step in, play center for the first time in your college career, and you're doing it for Arch Manning. That is a huge challenge. They only have one starter back on the offensive line. But to me, the thing that can help ease his transition this year is the comfort at running back. But Travion Weisner had 1,000. I got to be around him at the Women's College World Series because his girlfriend won the national championship for Texas, Mia Scott, and she's cute. So CJ Baxter, I'm looking for you. You're going to be a huge, powerful comfort blanket, safety blanket for Arch Manning this year.
Yeah, and just one thing I want to add, and it's exciting as a Texas graduate to be number one, but the fact of the matter is Texas has to win when it matters the most. You can't just make it to the college football playoff or be the number one ranked team. You have to win a national championship. You have so much talent. You have all the NIL that anyone talks about. So I think as a guy who played there when Texas was one of the top ranked teams, it's great to be number one preseason, number two, number three, but if you keep on losing when you get to the playoffs, that's when it starts to be a little bit less exciting.
Indeed. Now, we mentioned winning national championships, Sam, at Texas. Clemson has won 2 in the Dabo Swinney era. And Holly, I want to start with you. You're going to see them week 1 against LSU. Very atypical program. Dabo has done it his way, but slowly but surely, he's sort of evolved to the new way of the sport. And you say there are some key things he has done to get Clemson right back in contention when many people thought it could be the beginning of a slight drop-off.
Well, number one, Dabo Swinney has dipped his little baby pinky toe into the transfer portal, but it's with great intention. And he's brought in 3 really impactful players at defensive end, linebacker, and wide receiver. And I do think that he is being very intentional about the kinds of guys he's bringing into the locker room. The defensive end, Will Help from Purdue, he can make an impact right away. And then 6'5" wideout, Christian Smith, I think he can be an impact receiver. We used to see them have this big possession receiver in the end zone on those national championship teams like T. Higgins, Mike Williams. Look for Christian Smith to be that guy. But the other thing that Dabo's done, and I think people are forgetting this, he's got a pretty famous quote out there that said, "Our locker room is our transfer portal." This is the first time in 25 years that Clemson has 8 returning starters on offense and defense. I think they're loaded. They've developed from within, and they've got the culture they need to succeed.
Yeah, Holly, you hit on a couple of things that I think are key with Clemson. As somebody that has criticized Dabo Swinney for not participating in the transfer portal sooner, I see where he's coming from now. And I have to say that I feel like I was wrong. And obviously we still have football to play here, but I think when you look at what he's built, and Sam, you've talked about this before on this show before, the culture that he's got, you talk about all the guys that are returning, he really sells guys on that program and actually buying in, and it is truly like a family atmosphere there. And Holly, you mentioned the type of guys that he was actually going to bring in from the transfer portal. It's a very specific type of player that he is looking for. We've heard a lot about how Texas Tech and all these other teams have thrown money around trying to just bring the best guys in. But when it comes to culture and somebody that's going to fit within your program, and that the guys that have committed to your program are going to accept, that really matters. So I think we're going to see this year the culmination of that paying off for Dabo Swinney and Clemson.
Yeah, Clemson should have been ranked higher. I think 1, 2, or 3. Anywhere in that number, they should have been ranked. The reason why is that their defense struggled last year. Well, they have a new defensive coordinator. What do I mean by struggle? Let me be specific. They gave up 292 rushing yards versus Texas in the playoffs. Offense is fine, but you're returning guys like Peter Woods, guys like T.J. Parker, Avion Terrell, and Sammy Brown, who was an outstanding freshman last year. Oh, by the way, Tom Allen, who was at Penn State last season, led them to a top 3 defense, is now your new defensive coordinator. And so all the offensive firepower is still there, and now they have the defense to match. Clemson should have been ranked higher.
All right, we'll see. Clemson is opening against LSU. That's one of the games Holly's going to be covering. She's got a whirlwind first couple of weeks. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. But the big story about LSU, Holly, is the condition here of Garrett Nussmeier. Patellar tendonitis is what we hear. They're monitoring it minute by minute. What are we hearing?
So I talked to some people today that have been at practice and told me that he's doing fine. He really just had one day that he had an awkward step and that aggravated a previous injury. Keep in mind, in 2023, he had a surgery on what's called Osgood-Schlatter. You know that funky bump you get in the front of your shin and tibia? A lot of young men get that as they're growing. He had that repaired. He just got a little bit of tendonitis where that patella tendon rubs on his shin. But I'm told he looks good and is doing well. So no discomfort, no sign of discomfort was the quote I got from practice.
That is great news. You'll be there on the call Saturday night at Death Valley, August 30th. That would be Clemson's Death Valley, just to make sure we can put that correct. Both, of course, Death Valley. On the way here on College Football Live,